My name is Kay Brown, and I am curator of the Galen Brown Art Collection. And this story, what we're talking about today, is actually Galen's story. Galen was a U.S. Marine Vietnam War veteran. He was wounded in action in Hue in 1968. And the lovely picture there was taken right before he was wounded in action. When he came home from the war, it took him months to recover from his injury, but it took him much longer to heal what was inside of him. One of the things that Galen was fortunate to be able to have, and that was to be able to create art, and used his art for healing. When he passed in 2013, he left his children over 100 pieces of art. And they brought it to me because I've had experience in being executive directors of the Arts Guild, and plus the fact that he was my ex-husband and they were my daughter and my bonus daughter. And we looked and looked at the art, and we thought, what are we going to do with all this art? But over the period of several weeks, as we were looking at it, we realized that there was an incredible message in this art that we could not keep to ourselves. And we realized just by looking at his art that he had gone through a transformation of a whole lot of pain to almost some peace in his life. We have had several shows of his work now, one of them recently in South Dakota, and we've been very fortunate to have Vietnam vets come to the show. And some of them cry, but most of them walk away with the feeling that, you know, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to think about this. What have I got under the surface that I don't know about, that I need to share? His retrospect, which is called Shapes and Shadows, will be having its premiere in Minnesota at the Northfield Arts Guild Gallery on September 28th, and it runs until October 27th. In that retrospect, you can see his journey as an artist. One of the pieces is a piece called Boots, which was one of the very first pieces he did when he came home from Vietnam. It was the jungle boots, and he wore them, and he had them on when he was shot. But I know that a lot of Vietnam vets have left their jungle boots on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. But Galen fortunately left us a drawing, and that's included. The second piece is really very important to understanding Galen's journey, is a piece called Under the Surface. It's a difficult piece to look at because it's very dark. But if you look at it really, really closely, you'll see the ribbons from Vietnam just under the surface. And that's the name of the piece, of course, is Just Under the Surface. That becomes an important piece because he took those same images, those ribbons, some of his medals, and used them throughout his pieces for 40 years. One of the ones that is probably the most prominent is he did a series of pieces called the Jessica pieces after his daughter Jessica. Those are powerful images. Galen was a political animal. And so these were done in the 1980s, and so he took the pieces and he incorporated what was going on in the day, but also made references back to his experiences in Vietnam. And as you look at that Jessica piece, and it's Jessica number 3, I believe it is, you can see there's Tiananmen Square, and there is the championship boxer, but then is 3/1968, and that was the day he got shot in Vietnam. And if you look vertically, there is the ribbon that goes throughout the piece. He did another series called the Wounded Knee series, and that was a very, very successful series, and that was at the Doll Fine Arts Gallery in Rapid City. He had a showing there. And what he did is he was a student of history. He studied and studied and studied what was going on at Wounded Knee, what happened at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And so he did a Wounded Knee 1 and a Wounded Knee 2. And part of that series, the Wounded Knee 2, is in this retrospective called Shapes and Shadows. And I did not know this until I had a Vietnam veteran actually look at the piece. The pieces are so complicated, but they are so truthful in their explanation of what was going on historically. But in that piece, I noticed the images, the peace pipes, I noticed the maps of Wounded Knee, I noticed lots of different things in those pieces. What I didn't notice is that in the background are subtle references to checkpoints in the Vietnam War. Checkpoint Charlie, Eagle. And so he understood what the battle was like even in the second Wounded Knee incident. And he reflected back on that, and he used his experience in Vietnam, and you can find those in those same kind of images. When he was politically interested in something, it usually ended up being an art piece, and it usually had a very, very good story. He has numerous series that he has done. He's done a nature series, and those are all part of his retrospect. But as you see that, the series, those references to his Vietnam experiences get fewer and more subtle and more subtle. He did a wonderful series called the Justice Flag series, which he did in 2000, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those later. But in some of those, you can see the subtle references. He was diagnosed with cancer a number of years ago and survived his first bout of cancer. And he has some wonderful, joyful pieces that he and his wife, Sue-Ann, went to Vietnam after he recovered the first time from his cancer. And when you look at those beautiful pieces of Vietnam, there's Vietnam, Nam Pinh, I think, is one of them. The colors are not so sharp. It's all very relaxed and calm. So you can see that journey from the beginning where all that violence, all that feeling of being distraught just keeps getting less and less and less as he works through it with his art. One of the very last series that he did was a series called the Recovery Series. And he took his x-rays from the second time he got diagnosed with cancer and studied them and looked at it and took those x-rays and made them into a piece of art. There is one of the series, which is called Recovery Series number 9, I believe it is, that you look at it, and it is an x-ray, but you look at that, and you can see the Vietnam ribbon running through it. So from the 1970s until 2013, it was a whole process of healing. That's the show, the Shapes and Shadow retrospective. Part of that show is actually, part of the pieces are actually being showed right now at the Mitchell Hamlin Law School in their law library. There's about 4 of those pieces from the retrospective. But again, that one began September 28th. I have to not be remiss in saying something very important about Galen. Galen was a political being. But more than anything, he was a patriot. And from 2004 to about 2010, he did 70 works called Justice Flags. And he took the American flag, it's a black and white image of an exploding flag. He took those images, he took those flag images, and he thought about them. And what they are is that they're like intelligo prints. And some of them are just very small little pieces, and some of them are 50 by 40. But it amazes me how you can take one subject like the American flag and reinterpret it and reinterpret it and reinterpret it. But some of them are almost fragmented, like the people's lives that were involved in the Vietnam War. And some of them are so colorful and joyful. But because those are so unique, we decide also to create a special exhibit with just the Justice flags. And it will be at the Dow Art Gallery on University Avenue in St. Paul, and it opens Flag Day, which is very important, which is June 14th and runs through July. One of the things that you will see, in addition to the beautiful flag images that he has, is that you will see his flag displayed, the one that was given to his children at his funeral. In that flag, in that box, there is also his Purple Heart. There are also his medals. And so it's a story, the Justice Flag series is a story of a patriot who believes in questioning the United States, who believes in making people think about what was going on. And that is really Galen's whole message throughout all of his artwork. He said, I'm not going to lecture anybody. I want people to come and look at my artwork, but more than anything, I want these people to think.